Would you stop farting? Gotta have all these farts on the recording. Oh, yes? Anything else you would like to add? Good thoughts. Hey, thanks for joining the Escape With Me Book Club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Caitlin.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we are going to Fantasyland Disney, because they don't give a place, so there we go. Published on April 5th, 2016, Once Upon a Dream is the second book in the Twisted Tales series. This book was also written by Liz Braswell. With the dragon Maleficent defeated, there is only one thing left to do, and it is for Aurora to receive true love's kiss. Except it doesn't work. The true villain has yet to be defeated, but how can Aurora defeat them when she isn't even sure which of her lives is real? On a side note, did you catch a reason that Merryweather's spell didn't work? I don't remember one.
Yeah, we couldn't pick it up because the actual events, right, not the twisted events, didn't happen until the middle of the series, right? That weird interim where you finally got to realize what was going on.
Because I just remember, obviously the spell didn't work in the beginning. And then when the fairies are like, hey, this is what really happened. Merryweather says the spell and it's supposed to be, hey, true love's kiss. And of course in the movie, that's how it worked. But I don't remember any point in the book them being like, oh, this is why it didn't work.
I want to say maybe that what I got was that they weren't actually in love. It wasn't true love. And I saw that kind of in your notes. This love at first sight isn't the kind of love that we needed for this kind of spell. Because in the end, she wakes herself up. It's not his kiss.
I don't know. That was weird.
Yeah.
This series has a tendency to over-explain simple things.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I was like, I wonder why, never gets discussed.
Yeah, that left us a question.
So, can't really give much more background on this series. We gave our series background in the first episode, but I can say for the movie, this is one of my husband's favorite Disney movies. So we've watched it a couple of times, and I actually have enjoyed it more as an adult than I did as a kid. As a kid, I thought it was boring.
I completely agree. So this is my mom's favorite Disney movie, mainly because Maleficent is her favorite Disney villain. And I did not appreciate it as a child, but as an adult, the animation is so beautiful. The backdrop photos, the music is gorgeous. I mean, the woman who sings for Briar Rose, she's got a beautiful voice. And for its time, right? I mean, she was number 2. She was a second princess.
Yeah, and I just love the whole plot of, oh my gosh, Aurora's in love, but she has to go marry the prince. What? And then it's this whole misunderstanding that they don't realize that it's each other. We're good.
Yeah.
As an adult, I think it's really cute. And then the two dads' relationship, I actually really like.
Oh,
I like all of it. And then the fairies being really caring, but also really bumbling. And then, of course, Maleficent is iconic.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, the make it pink, make it blue. When they tried to live for 18 years or 16 years, I guess, without magic, we miss a lot of that really interesting part of Aurora's life, and we only get to see it there at the end. But I could not imagine having these 3 ditzy women as your people raising you.
Doing their best to understand human ways.
Yeah.
Because they haven't used their wands, and then they use their wands in the movie, and they're like, oh my goodness, finally!
Yeah.
And they try to cover everything up, except they don't do a good enough job, and that's actually what signals the Raven. It's so good. The music's beautiful, like you said. I appreciate it much more as an adult than I did as a kid.
For sure.
This is age level young adult still.
Yeah, this whole series is YA.
Yeah. So they've got some of the, it's twisted because teenage life isn't good or fair, and the pendulum thing where it's like as a kid, everything is awesome. And then you hit a teenager and you're like, everything isn't awesome? Well, then everything's terrible.
Yeah.
So we get some fun little things of that. Content warning: abuse, emotional and mental, drug use, alcohol mentioned, suicide mentioned, mental health, specifically depression, animal cruelty mentioned, blood, language, which is PG-13, graphic violence, and suicidal ideations.
Yeah, she has some dark moments in there.
This book is very blue.
Yeah.
The cover is also blue, which we'll get to in a second, but the whole book is very blue.
like you said, it's very woe is me once she actually figures out what's going on, which I mean, it makes sense when we finally got to the point where Philip's like, oh, we're diving further into your mind. I was like, I love this crap. As a therapist and everything, I was like, let's go. And then we meet her little alter ego self that's basically all of her insecurities. I just thought it was such a good parallel.
Yeah.
And especially for young adults who can't name those kind of things, I really liked that.
Yeah, since they don't have the language for it, but they can identify with it still.
For sure.
Yeah, depression was a good one to go on for her.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get too into that, judge a book by its cover. So this was the last book to have the first cover, which is Aurora facing to the side, and then her profile is the landscape of the land.
Yeah.
First one had that, the second one has it, and after that, they only have the redone covers, which basically show the villain. And then it's a color that's reminiscent of the movie and some minor things around. But this cover, both of them, all I can think is, yep, that's Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, I mean, because like you said, Maleficent strikes such an iconic silhouette. You don't look at that and think anything but Sleeping Beauty or Maleficent, even if you don't really know the Sleeping Beauty story. Because I think a lot of people didn't give Sleeping Beauty the credit it deserves until the Maleficent movies came out. And then, yeah, Once Upon a Dream, okay, that's very obviously Aurora if you do know the stories.
Yeah. I feel like that's all the cover really needs to be. I mean, the cover's really cool.
Yeah.
I like it. But like I said, for marketing purposes for Disney, all you really need to know is that it's Sleeping Beauty.
Basically.
So if you like Sleeping Beauty, you buy it. And if you don't like Sleeping Beauty, you don't buy it.
Agreed.
So I really like the covers. The second covers, not the first one. The first one was kind of meh.
Yeah, I like all the books when they kind of transition to the villain or kind of the dark-esque outline with just some hints of what's going to be in the book.
Minimalist kind of vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Like part of your world is just Ursula with some tentacles and then some various undersea things and then the shell, right, that's used to store the voice. It is kind of minimalistic, like you say.
I like it. I'm also a minimalist, so sometimes less is more, man.
It really is.
So this book is really good. I liked it more than Aladdin.
Agreed.
But it ended up still being a 4 stars, and it's mainly because of the ending.
Yeah, I see how this book was good until it wasn't. I thought it was the other way around. I was super confused. I thought it was weird and a slow start until she got outside of the castle, and then I liked it.
Really? I liked the castle portion a lot.
It was just so confusing. For these books, not being as long as they are, and you know you're waiting on a twist, right? And it's the same problem I had with Aladdin. We went so much in Aladdin going word for word from the movie.
Yeah.
Until you finally got to the twist. This one wasn't like that, but it was all these mind games, which again were good, but I really liked it once she got out. And then, like you said, the combat in the end did kind of fall flat, but it wasn't horrible.
I like that this one had more of a mystery vibe. I liked the confusing of figuring out which is real and which isn't. And I like how the author sprinkles in just little clues that something's wrong.
Yeah, something's off.
And you're not sure what it is, but something is wrong. Like the henchman being hideous. And then every once in a while, people will say something. And it just really gave off City of Ember vibes because it's all, oh, we can't go to the outside, so we have to stay here. But we're dealing with food shortages, sort of.
Yeah.
Not as serious as City of Ember, but it still has some food issues. Their big thing is entertainment isn't really in high volume. It's interesting to me. And I liked that because it was like, oh, so which one is true? Because I thought the book started at the end and then goes back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this is a real twist. And I guess I took it at face value. So it was fun over time to be like, okay, this is weird. What is going on? And then the little snippets that Aurora sees. So you're kind of discovering it at the same time if you're like me and you were like, yeah, totally. This is exactly what's happening and not the other way. And I also like the snippets of there's a real world out there. And like I said, that very reminds me of City of Ember, which I really like City of Ember. So it was fun.
Yeah, I've never read it, so maybe that's why. Because I'm the same way as you. I thought from the beginning, oh, this is the twist. The fairies were evil all along. Because a lot of people talk about Maleficent as a kind of misunderstood villain figure. The disrespect of not being invited to this very important event.
And if they were going the Maleficent route, the movie where Maleficent was actually the good guy the whole time. And so
exactly. So I was like, oh, okay, I agree with you. Like, this makes sense. This is the twist. But I also think they pulled the curtain too early because it did a cut to Philip's perspective well before we had actually pieced everything together. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what. And so then all of a sudden you cut to Philip's perspective and you're like, oh, we're in her dream. There's no lead up. They just tell you.
Yeah. There were other things that didn't work so well for me. Like the whole math thing is weird. Aurora's trying to do math, but she sucks at it. She's like, oh, a princess can't do math. And it's gaslighting on Maleficent's part, which Maleficent's gaslighting is so good.
Go take a nap. You're just a sleepy teenager.
Yeah. It's like, oh, honey, you can't do anything. You can't learn magic. You can't da-da-da-da-da. And so Aurora just feels so useless, and it gets to the mental and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
She does the abuse well, really well, but oh, you can't do math, and it was one of the ways she was trying to make Aurora feel kind of worthless. And then later on, Philip's like, obviously you can't do math. You're in a dream. You can't do math in dreams.
But it was meant to be one of those things that hinted at us because she was describing the way she looked at a math problem and what happened in her head. And at first I was like, are we trying to say that she's dyslexic?
Dyscalculia.
Yeah, exactly. That she just can't read or whatever. But then when he explained it right, it made 100% sense. Yeah, no one can do math in their brain while they're sleeping. That's not how your brain is computing at that time.
Yeah, it's true, but it's a little anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Because I thought Maleficent was using her magic to make Aurora dumber. And he's just like, no, it's because you're in a dream. And I was like, oh, that's kind of anticlimactic. But I guess she's using her home field advantage. Haha, it's a dream. I'll make you do math, and then you can't do the math.
Yeah, well, because like I said, the timing of where we get the information, because Philip makes that connection for her much after we already know what's going on. Whenever the audience found out she was in a dream world, for me, it all clicked into place then, because she's always talking about how she can't concentrate and time feels really weird because all of a sudden she'll be in one place to another. Well, yeah, that's how everyone commonly describes dreams. So that makes sense now. We, the audience, could put it together, but they did that explanation by giving Philip the line.
Yeah. Also, there's a Noah's Ark reference, and now I have so many questions.
Yeah. What even was that? Where was that? Remind me.
It was when Aurora was doing homework in the beginning. And I get that Agrabah in Aladdin, they were talking about, oh, Egypt and other desert places. But this one is like, hey, the Bible exists. What? What is happening? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, we're in France, so I can talk about Spain, like locations. But it's like, I have questions about the religion now. I have so many questions that will not be answered ever. They were just like, yeah, let's throw in this Noah reference.
Yeah, I totally didn't even catch it. Probably because I was listening to it, not actually reading it.
I think it was a reference like, oh, I could just cry and flood the world and have a second Noah's Ark or something like that. It was something offhand, but if this is canon, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So many questions.
Yeah, for real.
So a bunch of weird things happen. Like she lays down and a deck of cards hits her in the head, which I was not expecting. And so she sees things in them like, oh, I'm hugging a lion and petting a rabbit. And I kind of wish the cards had more symbolism to them.
Yeah.
They were predicting what was going to happen only because tarot cards.
I was about to say like tarot cards. Yeah.
So that would have been fun. But I couldn't really place a reference to things like, oh, Aurora's hugging a lion. Lion never shows up. I don't think she's really hugging any predators.
I can't remember if maybe one of the symbols of the kings or something might be a lion, you know, like a house symbol.
Yeah.
But if it is, that wasn't explicitly stated to where you would make the connection.
Yeah. I don't think it really was anything other than, hey, cards.
Yeah.
There are things that exist in the real world that you shouldn't know about in dream world, but you totally do.
Those little pieces of jogging her memory, the whole thing of her petting a rabbit, then a deer. She's like, I actually do remember this. I do remember this happening, even though quote unquote life that she's living now, she shouldn't have ever interacted with rabbits or deer.
Yeah. And then of course at the ball, Aurora's like, hey, these things. And Maleficent takes all but one of them. I can't remember which one she keeps, which did not actually play a big role in anything. So once again, I'm a little disappointed by the cards going back now, because once she's out of the castle, the cards mean nothing.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what could have been edited out of the story, because those seem to be planted there for a reason, but then they have no payoff.
Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you introduce a gun in the first act, it has to go off by the third, yeah.
And it didn't.
And there are a couple of things like that. Here's an example of someone I would have totally forgotten about if I hadn't written them down. Her cousin Laura. Who cares? Laura is a brat, and you think she's going to try to coup Aurora at some point or actually make a fuss, but the only thing she's worth is at one point Laura is coming out of a door, so Aurora has to use another entrance.
Yeah.
You could have had anyone be there. You didn't have to have this weird rivalry with her cousin. That never paid off for her. I don't even know if she was real. They wake up and it's like, oh my goodness, all these people are dead. But she's not like, oh, where is my cousin? Laura.
Yeah, because I think when they introduced Laura, they had explained that there were certain of Aurora's family members in the castle when the event happened and everyone got locked in. And in reality, that we know as the reader, that parallels to the people who were put to sleep in the castle. So it would make sense for some of Aurora's family to be there because they were preparing for the wedding between her and Philip. But the only thing I could see that paying off eventually is, okay, well, if Aurora somehow died, then here's someone with her blood who might be able to get the spell, you know, that she's eventually trying to cast to work.
Yeah. Or to pay off in the real world. Apparently they have some sort of rivalry. And then in the real world, when she's like, no, I can rule. I don't know, have a moment with Laura or something. I don't know. Like I said, once she leaves the castle, Laura's useless.
Completely, yeah. Same with the stable boy.
Yeah, I forgot about that guy.
Yeah, I thought, man, this dude's real cool. For a second there, I'm like, are we not going to have a Philip? Because I think she even makes a comment about him being attractive.
Yeah, but she's also like, oh, he's good for now.
Yeah, and it was very much playing around and everything. Which, I mean, fine, okay. But yeah, as soon as she left, she was like, oh, if I know there's an outside, I'll tell you. And then she straight up leaves.
Oh my gosh, she did. I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of his character was to have someone for her to go to be like, hey, do you recognize this feather? And he's like,
yeah, that's a bluebird. That shouldn't be here.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Also, the creepy old dude that is hitting on Aurora, even though she is significantly younger than them, that gets glossed over.
I don't even remember that one.
Thankfully, he doesn't have that many scenes, so it's not grooming, but
yeah,
that was weird. Yeah, it was, what is his name? It was right in the beginning, in the first ball, and she's talking about people, and she's like, oh, I could go talk to the stable boy, or I could go talk to this guy.
Oh, that's right, because she does talk to him about...
And then he gets freaked out.
Yeah. Oh, man.
That was weird.
Mm-hmm. You shouldn't talk to anybody about this.
Yeah, and that was good advice, but I was like, why did he have to be flirtatious towards her?
Yeah, gross.
Just a thought. I do really like the concept of the exile, to skip to other people that are mentioned in the castle. But, okay, so here's the thing. You come to find out it's Philip's dad.
Yeah.
And he's in the world because he was there for the wedding. And when Maleficent took over, he was like, no, this isn't how you run things. And so she exiled him.
Yeah.
Why didn't she just kill him?
Yeah, that is confusing too. But I want to say part of it was because she might eventually need him, because part of the whole thing is she was killing off royalty of the court because I was keeping everyone alive longer.
Yeah.
I guess he would have been the second best to Aurora. But yeah, it definitely felt a little lazy. But it was all like the very beginning. So she didn't want to necessarily come across as completely evil. Because that was something I noticed too, was despite traditional Maleficent being a pretty intense villain, she did her best to come off as a benevolent queen who was just trying to keep her people safe.
She does.
And do what she could to keep them entertained, fed, what this life is like. So I feel like immediately, oh, there are these thorns and no one can leave, but I'm going to kill this fella. Like that wouldn't have been a good way to start off.
Yeah, but she does that with other things like the minstrel. She's like, oh, he's been exiled, and then you find out he's dead. And I'm like, why didn't you do the exact same thing with Philip's dad?
Yeah, that's fair.
And apparently killing him would be better because he's royalty, so it would give her more power. I don't know. That didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no.
Let him live and cause me problems another day.
Yep, exactly. Plot device. doesn't make sense.
No. And we apparently just needed him to survive.
Yeah. Although I did love him.
Not her parents, though. Her parents can die.
Yeah, straight up dead. That was interesting.
I like the idea that the balls give Maleficent power.
Yeah.
But once again, that's another thing I'm like, why? Why does using more magic give her magic?
Yeah, and I feel like they explained it a little bit in the purpose of the balls and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember at this point.
Is it to be a distraction so she can kill someone?
Yeah, that's what it was. After every ball, that's when she would take someone and sacrifice them. I think that's what it was. You're right. Because at the ball before Aurora leaves, that's when she kills Lady Astrid.
Yeah.
Can we, though, sidestep? I know it happens a little bit later. When we do cut to the outside and it's to all the fairies wandering around the castle, because all of a sudden people will just start screaming violently and they're dying right in front of the fairies' eyes. And I'm like, that's gruesome.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yes. This whole thing. There's so much murder, so much blood.
Yeah.
What is happening?
Yeah.
Beauty.
Nope.
Oh, no, that's the next one.
Next one.
Yep. Sleeping Beauty, guys.
Yeah. And again, I mean, that's kind of classic. I think even early Disney, they took a lot of Hans Christian Andersen and those fairy tales and they made them nice.
And then they made him unnice.
Yeah. Well, even these, if you think about it, if you think even a little bit deeper, there was some theory that went out or someone pointed out, this is the way lions actually behave. And for the Lion King, talking about what would have realistically happened whenever Mufasa died and Scar came through. And we don't think about these things because it's Disney, but if you give it any attention, if you peek behind the curtain just a little bit, you're like, this is too much.
Yeah. So we're basically outside.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that really happens is she has this weird relationship with her parents where they're in the dungeon and it's like, oh, they did all these horrible things and they're the real bad guys and Maleficent's the good guy and all of that. Aurora has some weird reactions to them. She goes down there one time and she sees that they're kind of in a daze.
Yeah.
And that terrifies her and then she runs to Maleficent. That was kind of weird. I mean, they're just in a daze. They didn't say anything to you. They weren't mean.
I think that was because she misheard the conversation between Maleficent and the king and queen.
That was later. Yes, that definitely happened. But it was before. It was like in the very beginning. And she was like, hey, I once went down to see them, but they were in shock. And then I hated it. And I never went back.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that was a little weird. And so, yeah, she goes in a second time because once again, Laura's only purpose is to walk through a door so Aurora can't walk through it.
Mm-hmm.
She goes up the secret staircase that exists and they really need to plug up some of these exits. Anyway.
Yeah, castles always have those problems.
I guess they don't really think they're going anywhere because thorns.
Yeah.
But also begs the question that the peasants are in the courtyard and raising food and animals and they're outside, but no gas hits them. Is the thorns keeping the gas? Anyway, not thinking that hard about it.
Nope.
But yeah, Maleficent is supposedly confronting them and is like, hey, you were terrible people and I'm a good person. And they say some weird things that don't quite make sense to Aurora. And then Maleficent's like, well, if I had a daughter, I would teach her how to magic and blah, 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 blah. Which leads to later when Aurora's like, hey, can you teach me magic? And Maleficent's like, no, you wouldn't be good at it.
Yeah. Again, that mental abuse and that instilling that self-doubt and lack of self-confidence.
Yeah. And it hitting a weird note because Aurora's like, oh, she treats me like a daughter. And then really obviously not treating her as a daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't think I mind the Philip skip when it's switched to his because I realized that it was a dream before that happened. Because on the day of the ball, it's like the golden ball or something.
Yeah.
Aurora always picks a theme and it ends up being a color because she's not very inventive. One was blue, like what she would imagine a river to be. And then one was gold, like she imagined the sunlight to be, which, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, well, okay.
So this was the gold ball. But on the day of it, these three lights, which are the fairies, so a blue, a green, and a red.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you need to wake up. And then that was the moment where I was like, holy crap, this is her dream. And so it switches to Philip a little bit after that. And so that's why I didn't mind the Philip skip, because I was already like, oh, this is her dream.
That's fair.
For some reason, when Philip kissed her, he fell asleep.
Yep. He got pulled into that spell too.
So even though he was in the castle, he gets thrown outside the castle in the dream?
Well, it's because he wasn't initially caught up in the first wave of the spell, right? So Aurora falls asleep, and that put everybody who was there at that time asleep. He comes in later, and so the way I kind of envisioned it was when he went into the dream world, he was put on the outside of the quote-unquote protection that Maleficent had put up.
Yeah. So he's outside in the world, and Aurora at one point decides something's wrong. She sees Lady Astrid get murdered. She sees herself through a little portal, and she's like, holy crap, what is going on?
Yep.
And that's when her two realities start to merge. And so she's running away. She runs, and she gets outside the thorns. Small inklings that she has magic powers because she controls the dream.
Yeah, the wishing, dream stuff.
Yeah, so she doesn't know that yet, but small inklings because she's actually able to get away. And then that's when she starts having the conflicting memories. And she's like, oh yeah, I remember Maleficent being my aunt. But then she remembers, wait a second, those fairies were my aunts. And so she's very confused, which it would be very confusing.
Yeah, it would be.
And so she runs into Philip, who remembers her, but she doesn't really remember him because it's just the beginning of her getting her memories back.
Yeah.
And Philip's my favorite prince.
Yeah, why?
And despite what everyone says, he's definitely a redhead, even though he's brunettish, but a redhead. I don't know. And Disney also needs to make up their mind about that, because sometimes they depict him as a brunette and then sometimes they depict him as a redhead. This book is of the opinion that he's a brunette.
Yeah.
I still think he's a redhead. Anyway, that beside, way too many of the princes have black hair in general.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I guess having a brunette prince is in and of itself pretty unique.
Yeah, but that's something I am very curious about. Why is he your favorite prince?
Okay, so a bunch of reasons. He's a redhead.
Fair. For you. Fair.
I really like how much of a personality he has. This movie actually puts a lot of emphasis on him versus some of our more classic ones. Think of Snow White and how much we see the prince. We don't.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Same thing with Cinderella. We don't really get much personality from him. And I think that even continues on into the Disney Renaissance. Like Eric, yeah, he loves his dog and he thinks she's kind of weird, but I don't really feel a strong personality from him because the entire time he is just being like, this is weird.
Yeah.
What is happening? This is weird. Beast, you do kind of, I'd even argue there you don't really get a personality because all you get is bitter and grumpy. And so you don't really know anything about Adam.
Yeah.
And what he was like other than being spoiled. So it's more emotions where I feel like Philip actually gets to be a person and he sees her and you get to see him in love and you get to see him disappointed and then you see him angry and scared and he just gets a whole range where I feel like the other princes just get an emotion they're allowed to have.
That's true.
And he's fun. He's fun. He's upbeat.
That's fair.
He's really positive. He gets thrown in and the fairies are like, hey, you're fighting a dragon. He's like, I'm doing what now? And then they give him a sword and a shield and he's like, I guess I'm fighting a dragon now.
Yeah.
And he goes and he fights a freaking dragon.
That's true. I never really thought about the wide range of emotions, like you said, especially for early on like this. The scene of him coming into the castle and picking up his father and dancing him around like, I'm in love.
Yes. And then how upset he gets when it's like, no, you can't marry a peasant girl.
Yeah.
And then when you really think about it, he's the only one that works his butt off for his girl. What does the Prince of Snow White do? Yeah, he also true loves kiss, but that's all he does. He just walks up one day and is like, hey.
Yeah, after seasons had passed too. Winter had melted into spring before he found her.
And Eric, he doesn't do anything, and then he almost marries another girl.
Arguably, he was under an enchantment, but yes, you're right. Because once he comes out of it, he then does that epic, typhoon thing where he's navigating the boat to kill Ursula.
Yeah, that is pretty cool, but that's not until the 90s.
Yeah, so this coming out in the 40s, I think?
Yeah, and I mean, it is a little bit damsel in distress, fine, but like I said, it's pretty cool.
I do agree.
Cinderella, he can't even remember anything about her. Like, he just knows there's a shoe. Different hair color. Prince Charming, your date had blonde hair. That girl had red, and that girl has black. What do you think is happening right now?
Yeah, that's fair. I can see that. So I'll give it to you that he's one of the better princes, for sure.
He does stuff, and he has emotions, and he's fun. I like the kind of Boy Scout personality he has.
I agree, yeah.
Which is continued in this book. And so there are parts where I'm like, yeah, Aurora, that's fair. You don't have to be in love with someone first sight. You barely know this guy. And sometimes he does stuff that is annoying. But then there are other times where I'm like,
he a catch, though.
Aurora, He's a catch. Shut up.
Yeah. One thing though, with the whole idea of the split mind, that's something I always feel like movies and books and stuff don't get into enough, because this is a pretty common plot device, I think, that you see in movies and films, where like this person's mind gets controlled or trapped or whatever, and they live out this whole separate life. And then they come back to their original one almost as if nothing happened. Like I think of like The Matrix, right? We don't get a lot of information or perspective of what it's like for two conflicting timelines, for two conflicting personalities, experiences, all this kind of stuff happen in one mind, because your mind doesn't actually split things out like a TV show where we skip from one scene to the other. It's just all there. So that's something psychologically that I really liked about this, was when she had those moments that were basically like panic attacks. It was brought on by her freaking out, where she would basically dissociate and remember something from her actual life. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and so they go... Okay, so this is a little bit of a leap of logic, but they get together and they fight off some baddies, and then they're like, you know what we should do? We should find the house you used to live in your mind, so we can talk to the fairies. And it works, but for it taking so long to get there, I was just like, why do we think will work? We were just like, hey, this makes sense. It's dream logic. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, dream logic, you could explain away a lot of the flaws with it. It's just dream logic. Nothing makes sense in your dreams.
Yeah. She even dreams up a village near the little cottage.
Yeah.
And the book goes back and forth on being realistic. Aurora has done nothing for her entire life, and then one day she has to walk really far and be combative and run. And so sometimes she's like, oh my goodness, I'm so tired. I don't know how I'm going to keep doing it. And then sometimes it's like at the festival at this village where she outdances Philip after a day of being exhausted.
I mean, I guess that could speak to how much mentality comes behind exhaustion, because in reality, it makes sense that she would go back and forth, because if you're running and you're running and you're running and you're running, it would make sense for you to be like, I'm exhausted. But in reality, actual Aurora physiology isn't doing anything. It's all in her mind.
Yeah.
So once she has some sort of, not necessarily reset, I do think they slept before they got to that village.
Which is another concept. The whole time they're like, I don't know if I need to eat.
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to sleep, but we're going to do that.
Yeah, we're going to do it just because it makes sense. Which, I mean, fair. You do it makes you comfortable. But I can see how when she needs to, she realizes, oh, I'm actually not that tired. I can sit here and dance and sing for hours and hours on end.
Which, there's a lot of traps and tricks Maleficent uses instead of downright going to find her.
Oh, yeah.
One of them makes me uncomfortable.
Oh?
Only because Ossory is introduced in the village as a gypsy, and then later on you meet him and he's like, oh, let me help you, but he's actually one of the tricks.
Yeah.
He tricks them, and then Philip murders him. And I'm like, why did we have to introduce this character as a stereotypical gypsy?
Yeah.
He's nomadic, he moves around, he sells stuff, but he's untrustworthy.
Fair.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Let's not, guys. It would have been so easy to not. Not great. But yeah, there's other things where it's, oh, let's play on her vanity because she's so pretty, right? And so these fairies are trying to dress her up and keep her there forever playing dress up. And I actually think it's very interesting because it's Maleficent doing these traps, and you can just see how much Maleficent doesn't understand Aurora.
Yeah.
Because she's not vain about her beauty. Actually, later on, she's like, I hate this.
Yeah, she doesn't like it. But like you said, it's the difference between what Maleficent thinks she would do, because what young girl wouldn't love that she's a beautiful blonde who can sing really well, right? But when it comes down to it, that's not the stuff that matters to her.
Yeah.
And it does work a little bit, right? But it doesn't work enough to actually destroy them.
Yeah, it works because she's like, okay, well, I'm in tatters. Another dress sounds great.
Sure, I'd like to be clean.
That sounds great. But then they kept going and she's like, this is weird. And Philip's like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the many challenges.
Yeah, the wood nymphs were before Ossory. They were like one of the first things that they faced.
And then the creepy figures that are animal but human keep popping up and they keep murdering them. And those are freaky. Some of them are weird and kind of scary. And I'm glad that they die. But even how they die is kind of scary. And it's just, oof. nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
There's a moment after, okay, so we've done a lot of the trials, but they're like, oh, maybe we have to sleep. Philip is worried about her, and he puts his blade in between them to be like, hey, so you know that we're safe next to each other. And she's like, why do you do this? And he's like, because I do. And I'm like, consent is hot.
Yeah.
And that was one of the moments where I was like, Aurora!
Come on!
He is a catch! Stop giving him such a hard time.
And I think that's what really pushes the next scene, into such a stark contrast, because she is, I think, slowly starting to realize what a great guy he is. I guess it isn't the next one, is it? But yeah, the one where it's the two Phillips fighting each other.
And okay, I get it, but it definitely feels like a teenage pendulum swing of, oh, I'm so trusting to everyone. And then finding out, oh, this one person isn't trustworthy. Nobody's trustworthy. Everyone has secrets.
Yeah.
Girl. You just met. Even if you did know each other, he's not going to be able to tell you freaking everything. We're trying to stop Maleficent, and you're worried about this thing that happened years ago? And that's one of the moments where I was like, you need to calm down. You need to chill out.
Yeah, but vacillating of emotions is very accurate, it feels like, for teenagers, because their development of the world is being literally developed right in front of their eyes. And then for Aurora, she doesn't know what to trust because she thought she was lived in this world for her entire life. And then all of a sudden, nope, it's a dream. That's terrifying.
Yeah. And I mean, the book does point it out that she's actually mad about the injustices of both of her past. And she's just taking it out on Philip because he's there.
Yes.
But even when they wake up the next day and there's the two Phillips, okay, so they go to sleep like normal and they wake up. And so there's a Philip there and he's trying to kiss her. And she's like, this is weird.
Yeah.
This doesn't seem right. And then another Philip walks up and he had been fishing because he wanted to apologize.
Yep.
He woke up early and went fishing to make her food. Like, Philip.
Yeah.
He is a cat.
Yeah.
Even though he's not 100% oriented, he's still like, hey, I can see why you're mad at me. I'm sorry. Ah! And she's dumb and she can't figure out which was the real one.
Yeah.
Right there. That should have been obvious.
Yeah.
And then they'd get into a sword fight and then she for real can't tell which one is which. And so the real Philip's just like, let me tell you every terrible thing I've ever done. And some of them are super petty and small, but he's like, I will tell you all of them. I love Philip.
Yeah.
There is no pride there. He is just like, I believe in this thing. I am all in. He's got his convictions.
Yeah. And I think in all the books, we're going to get a little bit more humanization from the characters and get a little bit more of that perspective. But like you said, we already had some of that going into this with him. And so just seeing him open up, talking about his family, his past, I think they get into it at some point that his mom died. That's why she was never present and how that impacted his dad and all this kind of stuff.
And you also learn that he has 3 sisters and a brother.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I love that we get that from him in this.
And I like that he has 3 sisters because that's why he's like, yeah, you can totally sword fight.
Yeah.
My older sister sword fights. She's great at it. She's better than me. And it's like, yes.
Yeah.
Philip is a feminist.
Yes, that's how you do that. Not like you said from Aladdin.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What can women do? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's not even go back to that tangent. Listen to the other episode if you want to hear that tangent.
Yeah. So there's a little thing about Aurora meeting her younger self, and they're like, oh, it's another trick. And I think Philip's like, no, this is your brain. This is you. This is inner you.
Yeah.
And she's just really depression words. And there's a moment here about why love at first sight is dumb, because the person you meet with the love at first sight is just a fraction of the real person. Because Aurora hears her inner self saying all these terrible things about herself, and she's like, hey, that is me. I am depressed. I am lazy. I am these things.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you're none of those things. You aren't like that. And she's like, well, why do you love me so much? He's like, I love you because you're so happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's so unrealistic to be like, oh, she's happy all of the time. And I actually really liked Aurora's point here about you don't love the real me, because it's like, hey, I am happy, but I'm also depressed. I am also lazy. I am also selfish. There are things about me that aren't great.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of toxic. He doesn't mean it like this, but it does go back to the gaslighting of Maleficent, where it's like, you're only worthy if you're happy. And since you're not happy all the time, in fact, most of the time you're depressed, most of the time you're worthless.
Yep. But again, this is why psychologically this was one of my favorite scenes, because it's that fighting your inner demon. Because we all, I think, have had that idea that for people who do fall in love, the idea, how long do you mask the bad parts of you so that this person doesn't see them? But in reality, can you really say that you're completely in love with the other person unless you know the flaws, you know the problems? Because that's what love is, right? Is waking up every day and choosing to love someone despite the issues that they might bring to the relationship, because you also bring issues to the relationship and they love you as well.
Every person does. It would be unrealistic to not.
Yeah.
So that was a moment where I'm like, okay, yeah, Philip, you got some stuff to work on. Love at first sight is dumb, but I still ship it.
100%. Yeah. You can see why they'd work together. But again, that's why I like it, where she comes out of this dream world more in love with Philip than she may have been when she went in. Because when she went in, she was just a hurt, sad teenager, justifiably heard that she was going to be off in an arranged marriage for her entire life and she wasn't going to get to be with the person she thought she loved, right? But it was like, oh, I don't get the person that I just met in the forest, you know, kind of like Ariel vibes. But when they wake up from this with all this interaction and personality, they're actually more in love than when they started.
Yeah, I actually think it's a much more mature look at relationships, because teenage love is intense.
Yeah.
Your hormones make it so. Everything is life or death. And then you grow up and you get your heart broken and you learn and you're like, hey, it's not that deep.
Yeah. Because again, this is the first time everyone experiences this. It does feel like life or death because you don't have any experience to know otherwise.
Yeah. And then as you go on and you learn about yourself and your needs and what you're willing to put up with, you hopefully do find that person that you are compatible with. And then you have the whole true love bit. And true love is most likely very different than your teenage love because it's not that intense all the time.
Exactly.
Nothing could say as intense as your first love, quote unquote, even if you stay with that person forever. It's different.
Exactly.
Also, your brain is still developing. She has like another decade.
For real.
Where her brain finishes developing.
100%. Yes.
Like I said, so there are points where I'm like, oh, this is really good. And then there are points where I'm like, girl.
Yeah.
You're being a teenager about this.
Yeah.
So the exile is King Herbert.
Hubert, yeah.
I love him.
Yeah, me too.
I love him in the movie. I love him in this book. He is amazing.
Yep.
And like I said, this is the point where I was like, why didn't you just kill him?
Well, and that's what she thought happened. I think it was Philip who put the two pieces together that the exile was his father. So he was going on and doing all of this despite thinking that his dad died. And then they find him and he's just this wild, crunchy dude who's just exploring the forest, knows 100% what's going on with everything. And is like, I got y'all. You go finish this quest. I'll defeat this stupid little monster that's popping up.
He's just wonderful. And you can see where Philip gets a little bit of it.
Yeah.
There are parts of him where even Philip's like, oh, dad. But there are other parts like his conviction he definitely gets from his father. That whole feeling of whatever you do 100%.
Yeah.
They both have that. And I just love him. He's great.
Yeah, he's great.
At some point along the line, Aurora has found out that her parents are dead. And I think the author does a really good job with her grief.
Yeah.
Because like I said, she's coming to terms about her real life. And so there are things that just aren't fair. Like, why did her parents send her away? Did they want a boy to rule things? All of this. And so she's really upset about their parents dying. And it could have been like the stereotypical, like, oh no, my parents are dead. So sad. But they go one step forward and really plays on the fact she's like, this isn't fair. I should have gotten a chance to get to know them so I could even decide whether or not to forgive them or not.
Yeah.
But now I don't even have that opportunity. And so it just shows how really unfair it is.
Yeah. And that complex grief of there's part of me that didn't know my parents, my real life. I didn't know my parents at all. I thought basically I was an abandoned orphan being raised by these three ladies. And then this dream world, which seemed very real, I was raised to believe my parents were horrible, greedy people whose desire to rule the world ruined the world. And then none of that is true, but she doesn't even have the time to process it before finding out they've died.
Yeah. And so it's like she said, it's not so much, oh no, they're dead. That's so sad. It's that loss of opportunity.
Yep.
Which is way sadder.
And I think way more relatable. And I've gone through this myself too. Don't realize that grief can 100% be realizing that you aren't going to get to do the thing that you wanted to do, or life isn't going to turn out the way that you expected it to turn out.
Yeah, it's the loss of opportunity that's the really hard part versus what is lost.
For sure.
So they finally make it to the cottage, and dream logic. The dream fairies are there, and then they give them armor, and Aurora at this point has a secondary sword of Philip's that she's conjured at some point. And I kind of like how they gave her armor, but at one point she was like, oh, this armor makes me look really bad, but I should probably go with something that's more me. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It felt like the pendulum swing, where Aurora was dainty and friendly and blah, 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 and she didn't like that about herself anymore. And so she could have gone all the way on the other side with the armor, but she's like, okay, no, I need to accept that that's not me, and I need to be myself. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because everyone goes through that.
For sure. That changing style of youth.
Yeah. And the maturity is finding the balance in between it of being like, hey, I can not like those parts of me and still like me.
Exactly.
I don't have to pretend to be someone else to be okay. It's okay to have bad things about yourself. And then you can work on them if you want to and if you are able to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Acceptance is the first step.
Yeah. And this book, while it is YA, it has a lot of mature growing in very short amounts of time.
Yes. This book felt more like a coming of age story than Aladdin did.
Yeah, for sure. But also I can see where it could be triggering for people, the need to grow out of your childhood because your situation dictates that's what has to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, it has to happen for everybody.
Well, no, I mean, you don't get to have a childhood because the situation the traumatic event that you're in dictates you have to grow up faster.
Ah, yes.
It's not good.
Yeah. But you can heal from it.
You can.
It is possible. And you learn all the coping mechanisms that your brain taught yourself that worked at the time but aren't necessarily healthy.
Mm-hmm.
The brain is actually very interesting when it comes to the depths it will go to shield itself from pain or harm. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, welcome to why I'm in my field.
So they practice fighting for a really long time, and then they're like, okay, back to the castle. And at this point, I was like, okay, so this book is, I'm in a castle. I left a castle, walking to the cottage, going back to the castle.
Yeah. Very little movement.
That was the point where I'm like, okay, so maybe this book could be considered boring at parts.
Yeah.
That's the part where it started to kind of go downhill for me, because I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's not about the journey back to the castle, because as soon as they leave the cottage, Maleficent is like, hey,
come back.
I don't know why she didn't do that earlier, but hey, it's fine.
Yeah. Again, plot device.
So they go back to the castle and they're gonna fight, and this is really where it falls off the wheels for me. This author is good at a lot of things, and combat is not one of them.
Especially contorted dream combat.
So it's really disappointing that she or Disney or somebody decided that the big climax of this story was going to be combat.
Yeah.
And it was phase combat. The fairies were like, let us fight. And then they don't do a good job. And then something else happened. And then something else happened. And then Aurora and Philip were going to fight. But I think Philip fought for it was people taking turns to fight, which I was like, this is weird.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved Merryweather, who is typically the more sassy of the three.
Yes.
Using taunting Maleficent to wreck her own people. That was good. I did enjoy that.
Yeah. But it was just the way everyone took turns.
Yeah.
Fauna or Flora. The red one went first, and then the green one, and then Merryweather. They each took turns. And we're like, that's unrealistic.
Yeah. But at the same time, that's what we're used to with D&D and that kind of stuff is turn-based combat.
Yeah, but turn-based is still them attacking each other. It's not one player going up and getting wrecked.
That's fair.
And then the next player going up and getting wrecked.
True.
It's still turns, but it's all at once.
Yeah, fair. Loved Philip's father coming back because you weren't sure whether or not he was dead or alive. And then he comes back in to save the day. Loved that.
Yeah. And then apparently Aurora is joined with the dream fairies, and she gets back all of the good parts of herself that were missing.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
It could have worked, but you don't spend enough time with the fairies to be like, oh, yeah, that's what she was missing.
Yep. But someone we have not talked about, and we can't not bring her in at this point, is Liana.
Oh, yeah.
From the very beginning.
I liked Liana.
I did too, but she was one of the things that made you knew something was off, because it was the other book you made me read, Song of Wraith and Ruin.
Yeah.
Her servant, the the main girl's handmaiden. It was giving me very strong those vibes where, like, you know, she's probably working for someone else and that she has ulterior motives, but that they genuinely do like each other as people.
Ride or die.
Yes. And then getting to the end where you kind of find out that Lyanna is that part of Maleficent that is human and does like Aurora. You didn't like that?
I actually hated that.
I kind of liked it.
I felt like a cop-out. And I was fine with her being another servant of Maleficent, and she gets to know Aurora, and she's like, you know what? Aurora is pretty great. I was fine with that. But yeah, they're like, oh, that was the good part. That's what Maleficent could have been. And maybe I was just disenchanted because the entire combat scene happened.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I don't know.
But I liked her so much because it was like, oh, she's the handmaiden. She's the ride or die.
Yep.
She'll do anything for her. She's distracting Laura for her. And then finding out, holy crap, she's one of Maleficent's lackeys. And then that has to do with Aurora's trust issues.
Yeah, for sure. I was sad when Lyanna died.
Yeah. So Aurora fights, Philip fights, it doesn't work. So Aurora has to do it. She's fighting because, you know, she had to. This is her dream. So she uses her magic to crush Maleficent. But then Maleficent turns into a dragon and seems impervious to most of her attacks. And that's, of course, when Philip's father arrives and is protecting all the people because the people were getting killed in battle. And so he's like, no, I shall protect them. And then come to find out, Lyanna decides against it and she attacks Maleficent with a dagger. And that's the only thing that can hurt her. And first you're like, because hell weapon, question mark. And then it's like, no, because Lyanna is Maleficent, so she can hurt herself. So Maleficent kills Lyanna. The symbolism of that and the metaphor, he gets a little lost. Maleficent can hurt herself, so she kills the inner portion of herself. And yeah, I'm sure there's some great symbolism that can be conjured for that. But
I mean, I think in the villain story, peeling off that last little bit of humanity that's left, that last little part that everyone's like, there's got to be something. I'm appealing to the human inside you. And they're like, nope, it's gone. It's dead. Good luck.
Yeah, I did predict that it was the part of Maleficent that liked Aurora, though. I was like, oh, maybe that's what it is. And then it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
And then, okay. Aurora decides the only way to kill Maleficent is by conjuring a gigantic spinning wheel and using the spindle to kill Maleficent. Why? That's Aurora's kryptonite. Why does that work on Maleficent?
Yeah, I feel like she explained her logic a little bit as she was conjuring it. And it was just this idea that it's what sent her into this dream world. Maybe it'll wake her up because the fairies had told her, you just have to wake up.
Yeah.
And so I think she probably thought killing Maleficent, getting that part out of her would wake her up because Maleficent was what put her to sleep.
Yeah.
But it didn't work, as we find out.
Yeah. And then, so she kills her and then she's still asleep.
Yeah.
And then Aurora's like, oh my gosh, Maleficent wasn't the real queen. I'm the queen. And so she pricks her own finger to wake up.
And we awake.
And then we awake. And then it gets worse.
Yeah.
That would have been a great place to stop and then go to the epilogue. Because instead, Aurora wakes up and she orders Maleficent to be burned and destroyed and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, but you're 16 and a woman. And I think if they just played into the inexperienced part of it, it's like, oh, you're 16. You've never ruled. You've never been in a castle. All fair points. But the sexism is boring. And that's what they mainly focus on.
Yeah.
So I was like, And she tries to comfort people because a lot of people are dead and they're waking up. They're like, oh my gosh, they're dead.
Yeah.
But I didn't like that either because she felt super removed and callous to her own people. And I get it. It's a lot. But this one guy just lost their wife and the kids lost their parents. And she's like, pat, pat. That's all I can do for you. And walks off.
Yeah. I mean, but to some extent, again, when we talk about trauma responses, you have to shove everything down and get through the day. And that's what she does. What I thought was an interesting parallel was exactly what she dreamed while she was dreaming of them saying she couldn't run the castle and she can't be queen, all that kind of stuff. That happened almost immediately upon waking up. And so she had to do what she had to do to make people take her seriously, right? She couldn't wake up and freak out because that would unfortunately feed more into people's perspective of her and what's going on.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like I said, it just felt a little callous. It was like, hey, this is a great day of everything sucks, frankly.
Because it does.
Why realism? It would have been awesome if it had just stopped when she pricked her finger. But okay, we had to have all this. And then Lyanna finds peace, and it's semi-confirmed that she's part of Maleficent. And that's where it ends. ends. And just like Aladdin, if it weren't for the epilogue, the ending would suck.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, why? All of this could have been talked about in the epilogue.
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't need this to be the final chapter. But yeah, epilogue. People are still mad she's a queen, but sucks to suck. She's queen, and she's slowly forgiving her aunts.
Yeah.
And yes, it's justified that she's mad at her aunts, but at the same time, I wish the book would have gone into a little bit. We make decisions that we think are best, and sometimes they don't work out, but that doesn't mean they're terrible people. And that doesn't mean you have to forgive them, but it goes a little hard the other way. I guess because they want it to be relatable to teens.
It's okay to struggle with this emotion. You're justified in your anger.
Yeah, it's okay to be like, I'm upset with the decision you make, but also realize that they thought they were doing the best that they could. And in a lot of ways, Aurora wasn't harmed by it, so it's not like a deep trauma. So like I said, it feels appropriate for a 16-year-old, though, so I'm not about to gripe on that. But yeah, they're not getting married right away, but it does kind of be like, hey, we're totally going to get married at some point, just not right now, which is fine.
Yeah, I do kind of like that, kind of the delay. I have to get my situation fixed first, and also people shouldn't be okay with me being queen just because I have a husband.
Yeah. And finally, she's like, okay, yeah, I am in love with Philip. And they finally kiss.
Yeah, you can kiss me now.
When Aladdin has more romance than Sleeping Beauty, something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, a Sleeping Beauty came out much earlier.
Yeah, and it was romance. I don't know. They could have had romantic moments and not kiss, but whatever. It's fine. She had to face her third trial from Maleficent.
I don't know. I think there were romantic moments, but maybe it's not the classics.
It could have been so cute. But yeah, so it ends with them kissing, which I guess is appropriate.
Yeah, that is technically part of what we know from classics like this is True Love's Kiss.
It is the tale.
Yeah.
The ending was...
Yeah.
It was 5 stars for me for a really long time, and then the ending happened and it was like 4 stars.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, 4 stars is pretty good.
General thoughts. Philip is still my favorite prince.
Yeah. I liked this one better than Aladdin.
Yes.
I did. I would read this again, skipping a little bit ahead. I actually recommended this one to people. The Aladdin, I was like, don't waste your time. But this one, I've told people about it. I'm like, I actually think this is interesting. But always, again, with the question is always weird. The way I describe it is, but you get to know what's happening in her head.
I find that this question actually fits a lot better than the first one.
Sleeping Beauty never woke up. That's not true.
But it is.
She does wake up.
I mean, eventually. But the point is, she didn't wake up from the kiss, which is kind of what I got from the question. There you go.
Oh.
That's actually a better summation of it than the other one, where what if Aladdin never found the lamp? But he did find the lamp, though.
Yes. Overall, I liked it, though.
Yeah, I like this book better than the Aladdin book. But then again, I like Sleeping Beauty better than Aladdin.
Fair. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's that bias or if it's actually this is a better book. I do think it's a better book, though.
I think it's a better book, too.
I think it plays more to her strengths.
Yeah.
Because the other one was very combat heavy, and that is
not great.
Which is fair. No hate, because I am also not the greatest at combat.
Yeah, it's hard to write combat.
So some people are gifted, some people are not. It's fine. Some people suck at dialogue. She's really good at dialogue.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get that she can't write a book with no combat. That feels like the vein they're going in.
Yeah.
But did the climax have to be combat? Yeah. Anyway, one question for the author. I would love to know how they pick what's next. Because we were talking about, well, why did they do Aladdin first? And then we found out Liz Braswell has degrees in archaeology, or what was it, history? Something to do with the Middle East.
Yeah.
So how did we get this one? Did she pick? Does Disney pick and like, hey, you have to do this? Or do they like, sit down together and are like, hey, this sounds good? Because it is a property. It is Disney's property, and they're the ones funding the person to write it. So it very easily could be Disney being like, hey, this is what you're going to do. And Liz being like, cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably more she takes her ideas with them, and then she has to probably meet a deadline of producing books in a certain amount of time.
Oh, heck yeah. No, that is absolutely 100% part of it.
Yeah.
Part of licensed writing is you have to write real fast.
Yeah. And granted, we see that they diverge in authors at some point soon, but I don't necessarily think they're like, okay, well, too bad that you want to write Frozen next. You have to write Beauty and the Beast next. Because if she doesn't have a story, then she doesn't have a story. So what is your next story? Then when do you need it done?
True, but I could also see she doesn't get a voice in it. They come back and they're like, hey, the next book's going to be Sleeping Beauty. Are you going to sign the contract or not?
Maybe.
Because they very easily could just be like, okay, if you don't do it, we'll get someone else to do it. That's part of licensed work.
Yeah.
So I am curious curious how open Disney is. And granted, she'd only written one book from them, but maybe more of a working relationship. But I could see it going either way.
I think mine might be more on the story-wise. I do agree with you. Why didn't the kiss work?
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty big divergence. And I like Once Upon a Time, right? That was a show that I really enjoyed. And something that they explored that I thought was really cool was just the idea that true love can come from any number of people. And I think, yeah, and Maleficent, don't they?
Yeah, that's exactly what Maleficent is. Her true love's kiss is from a mother figure, which my husband hated. My husband hates Maleficent.
Oh, I love Maleficent. But yeah, so I can see where people take adaptations of the whole true love's kiss thing, but that wasn't explicitly stated. So that's my question.
Yeah. And that's just kind of my point is why didn't Merryweather's spell work?
Yeah. So the other ones did.
Yeah. So question mark, but we never really get into that, I guess. We get to know every single thought she has in the castle portion. That is one thing going back. I don't know how much I would enjoy rereading. I'll talk about that in a second. Rating. I'd give it a Walk in the Forest out of 10. It was okay. It can be exciting at moments, but it's pretty chill unless you run into a dragon.
I'd say a jump off of a balcony into a pit of thorns out of 10. The jump's cool, but you didn't realize what was at the end.
The landing's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. If someone came up to me and was like, I couldn't read it, it was too boring, I would understand.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I really liked it, I could totally understand how other people could hate it.
Yeah.
Way more happens in Aladdin because way more happens in Aladdin.
Yeah.
It's not everyone's cup of tea. Read again. More likely than Aladdin.
Yeah.
But I feel like the second time I'd read it, the castle portion would be not as interesting because I'm not trying to puzzle out this mystery of what's going on. It doesn't really lend itself to rereading knowing the ending, or at least knowing the twist that, oh, she's still asleep.
I kind of disagree in the classic mystery sense novel of now that we know the ending, because we talked about all the little hints that were dropped of something's not quite right. I think I would pick up more on those now with all the information.
Yeah, but I don't know if that would make it interesting.
No, but that's not necessarily why you'd want to read it again. So I still thought it was good enough to read again eventually. I'm not very good at reading books a second time, but I would.
I'd be more likely to recommend this one to others. I've put it on my husband's shelf.
Absolutely.
But reread is...
strong word.
Maybe. I actually own the physical book of this one, where the other one was just a Kindle book.
Yeah.
So I'd have more of a chance to, but I don't know. It would be hard for me to be like, no, I won't read this other thing because I want to read this again.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's not like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings level. I'm going to reread this every year until I die.
Is anyone like, I'm going to reread The Lord of the Rings? That's a commitment. You would never read other books ever.
No, not other books ever. Some people go through Lord of the Rings so fast.
Oh gosh, how?
What was the guy's name who played Saruman? Christopher Lee. He said he read the books every year for the majority of his life.
How? It's so long. I am such a slow reader. I don't understand other people.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think I've told you, one of my supervisors at work, her book count for this year is in the 300s. So, I mean, part of it is she's not reading books as long, but she's read some big ones.
I know people reading only audiobooks and they aren't in the 300s. What even? What is this superpower?
She can't do audiobooks because it's too slow for her.
What the heck?
I know. I hate it. It makes me so mad. Anyway.
Oh my gosh. Favorite in the series so far. So I like this one better than Aladdin.
Yeah, I agree. This one was much better.
Next one is Beauty and the Beast. And I kind of like Beauty and the Beast and Sleeping Beauty about the same. But I am really excited for the next one, just to throw in a little bit of a plug for the next episode. But the question is, and it's way more interesting to me than the other two have been.
Yeah.
What if the witch that cursed the beast was Belle's mother?
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting because there's barely any mention of her mom in the movies.
Yeah, in the live action, she was like, oh, she got sick and then she died in France. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
But the drama cow is very happy right now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's insane. That gave her so much more leeway, I feel like.
I agree. When you don't have as much information.
Like Aladdin, when we were like, hey, you're just redoing the movie until you're not. Or this one, where it's like, hey, you're asleep. And then the pace is, okay, well, what are we doing now? So I'm excited. There's ones coming up that I'm actually pretty excited for. But have you read this book? Which Disney property reality are you excited to see made into a twisted tale? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring Once Upon a Time with us. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Caitlin.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.